Reflections. Society of the Spectacle. Excerpts from The Society of the Spectacle by Guy Debord. But for the present age, which prefers the sign to the thing signified, the copy to the original, representation to reality, appearance to essence, truth is considered profane, and only illusion is sacred. Sacredness is in fact held to be enhanced in proportion as truth decreases and illusion increases, so that the highest degree of illusion comes to be the highest degree of sacredness. In societies dominated by modern conditions of production, life is presented as an immense accumulation of spectacles. Everything that was directly lived has receded into a representation. The images detached from every aspect of life merge into a common stream in which the unity of that life can no longer be recovered. Fragmented views of reality regroup themselves into a new unity as a separate pseudo-world that can only be looked at.
I am a computer-generated person that doesn't exist in reality.
Hello, everyone. I'm an English artificial intelligence anchor. This is my very first day in Xingwan's agency.
The specialization of images of the world evolves into a world of autonomized images, where even the deceivers are deceived. The spectacle is a concrete inversion of life, an autonomous movement of the non-living.
AI translation technology to take you closer to the story and help you understand the power of this storm. Recently, this man walked French news channel France 24 through the destruction at his home.
Can you tell who amongst us is generated by AI and who is real? Well, soon newsreaders could be replaced by AI technology. Just so you're clear, I am not AI-based, but she is.
How does the public feel about the design? Well, Channel 1 has developed a unique new way to gauge sentiment, and it leverages our AI's ability to read and analyze data almost instantly. I quickly read the most recent 30,000 tweets posted to X about the Cybertruck, and based on the emojis people have been using, sentiment on the vehicle is indeed very mixed. Will Tesla revolutionize the truck market, or will the Cybertruck remain a niche player?
Oliver? Oliver!
Hi.
Oliver, what's coming to movie theaters this season?
Oh, right. Thanks. So think about it. We spend the majority of our days with our heads down staring at tiny screens alone. Isn't it about time we took a break from that and went back to staring at big screens with other people? That's right. It's time to look up from your phone, step outside, breathe some fresh air, then get in your car and drive to a dark movie theater, because these December movie releases need to be seen as big as possible.
The spectacle presents itself simultaneously as society itself, as a part of society, and as a means of unification. As a part of society, it is the focal point of all vision and all consciousness. But due to the very fact that this sector is separate, it is in reality the domain of delusion and false consciousness. The unification it achieves is nothing but an official language of universal separation. The spectacle is not a collection of images. It is a social relation between people that is mediated by images. The spectacle cannot be understood as a mere visual excess produced by mass media technologies. It is a worldview that has actually been materialized, a view of a world that has become objective. Understood in its totality, the spectacle is both the result and the project of the dominant mode of production. It is not a mere decoration added to the real world. It is the very heart of this real society's unreality. In all of its particular manifestations, news, propaganda, advertising, entertainment, the spectacle represents the dominant model of life. It is the omnipresent affirmation of the choices that have already been made in the sphere of production and in the consumption implied by that production. In both form and content, the spectacle serves as a total justification of the conditions and goals of the existing system. The spectacle also represents the constant presence of this justification, since it monopolizes the majority of the time spent outside the production process. Separation is itself an integral part of the unity of this world, of a global social practice split into reality and image. The social practice confronted by an autonomous spectacle is at the same time the real totality which contains that spectacle. But the split within this totality mutilates it to the point that the spectacle seems to be its goal. The language of the spectacle consists of signs of the dominant system of production, signs which are at the same time the ultimate end products of that system. The spectacle cannot be abstractly contrasted to concrete social activity. Each side of such a duality is itself divided. The spectacle that falsifies reality is nevertheless a real product of that reality. Conversely, real life is materially invaded by the contemplation of the spectacle and ends up absorbing it and aligning itself with it. Objective reality is present on both sides. Each of these seemingly fixed concepts has no other basis than its transformation into its opposite. Reality emerges within the spectacle, and the spectacle is real. This reciprocal alienation is the essence and support of the existing society. In a world that is really upside down, the true is a moment of the false, who exchanged the truth of God for the lie and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Romans 1:25. The concept of the spectacle interrelates and explains a wide range of seemingly unconnected phenomena. The apparent diversities and contrasts of these phenomena stem from the social organization of appearances, whose essential nature must itself be recognized. Considered in its own terms, the spectacle is an affirmation of appearances and an identification of all human social life with appearances. But a critique that grasps the spectacle's essential character reveals it to be a visible negation of life, a negation that has taken on a visible form. In order to describe the spectacle, its formation, its functions, and the forces that work against it, it is necessary to make some artificial distinctions. In analyzing the spectacle, we are obliged to a certain extent to use the spectacle's own language, in the sense that we have to operate on the methodological terrain of the society that expresses itself in the spectacle. For the spectacle is both the meaning and the agenda of our particular socio-economic formation. It is the historical moment in which we are caught. The spectacle presents itself as a vast, inaccessible reality that can never be questioned. Its sole message is, what appears is good, what is good appears. The passive acceptance it demands is already effectively imposed by its monopoly of appearances, its manner of appearing without allowing any reply. The tautological character of the spectacle stems from the fact that its means and ends are identical. It is the sun that never sets over the empire of modern passivity. It covers the entire surface of the globe, endlessly basking in its own glory. The society based on modern industry is not accidentally or superficially spectacular, it is fundamentally spectaclist. In the spectacle, the visual reflection of the ruling economic order, goals are nothing, development is everything. The spectacle aims at nothing other than itself. As indispensable embellishment of currently produced objects, as general articulation of the system's rationales, and as advanced economic sector that directly creates an ever-increasing mass of image objects, the spectacle is the leading production of present-day society. The first stage of the economy's domination of social life brought about an evident degradation of being into having. Human fulfillment was no longer equated with what one was, but with what one possessed. The present stage, in which social life has become completely dominated by the accumulated productions of the economy, is bringing about a general shift from having to appearing. All having must now derive its immediate prestige and its ultimate purpose from appearances. At the same time, all individual reality has become social, in the sense that it is shaped by social forces and is directly dependent on them. Individual reality is allowed to appear only if it is not actually real. When the real world is transformed into mere images become real beings, dynamic figments that provide the direct motivations for a hypnotic behavior. Since the spectacle's job is to use various specialized mediations in order to show us a world that can no longer be directly grasped, it naturally elevates the sense of sight to the special preeminence once occupied by touch. The most abstract and easily deceived sense is the most readily adaptable to the generalized abstraction of present-day society. But the spectacle is not merely a matter of images, nor even of images plus sounds. It is whatever escapes people's activity, whatever eludes their practical reconsideration and correction. It is the opposite of dialogue. Wherever representation becomes independent, the spectacle regenerates itself. The spectacle inherits the weakness of the Western philosophical project, which attempted to understand activity by means of the categories of vision, and it is based on the relentless development of the particular technical rationality that grew out of that form of thought. The spectacle does not realize philosophy, it philosophizes reality, reducing everyone's concrete life to a universe of speculation. Philosophy, the power of separate thought and the thought of separate power, was never by itself able to supersede theology. The spectacle is the material reconstruction of the religious illusion. Spectacular technology has not dispersed the religious mists into which human beings had projected their own alienated powers. It has merely brought those mists down to earth, to the point that even the most mundane aspects of life have become impenetrable and unbreathable. The illusory paradise that represented a total denial of earthly life is no longer projected into the heavens, it is embedded in earthly life itself. The spectacle is the technological version of the exiling of human powers into a world beyond, the culmination of humanity's internal separation. As long as necessity is socially dreamed, dreaming will remain a social necessity. The spectacle is the bad dream of a modern society in chains, and ultimately expresses nothing more than its wish for sleep. The spectacle is the guardian of that sleep. The root of the spectacle is that oldest of all social specializations, the specialization of power. The spectacle plays the specialized role of speaking in the name of all the other activities. It is hierarchical society's ambassador to itself, delivering its official messages at a court where no one else is allowed to speak. The most modern aspect of the spectacle is thus also the most archaic. The spectacle is the ruling order's non-stop discourse about itself, its never-ending monologue of self-praise, its self-portrait at the stage of totalitarian domination of all aspects of life. The fetishistic appearance of pure objectivity in spectacular relations conceals their true character as relations between people and between classes. A second nature, with its own inescapable laws, seems to dominate our environment. But the spectacle is not the inevitable consequence of some supposedly natural technological development. On the contrary, the society of the spectacle is a form that chooses its own technological content. If the spectacle, considered in the limited sense of the mass media that are its most glaring, superficial manifestation, seems to be invading society in the form of a mere technical apparatus, it should be understood that this apparatus is in no way neutral, and that it has been developed in accordance with the spectacle's internal dynamics. If the social needs of the age in which such technologies are developed can be met only through their mediation, if the administration of this society and all contact between people has become totally dependent on these means of instantaneous communication, it is because this communication is essentially unilateral. The concentration of these media thus amounts to concentrating in the hands of the administrators of the existing system the means that enable them to carry on this particular form of administration. The social separation reflected in the spectacle is inseparable from the modern state. The product of the social division of labor that is both the chief instrument of class rule and the concentrated expression of all social divisions. Separation is the alpha and omega of the spectacle. The institutionalization of the social division of labor in the form of class divisions had given rise to an earlier religious form of contemplation, the mythical order with which every power has always camouflaged itself. Religion justified the cosmic and ontological order that corresponded to the interests of the masters, expounding and embellishing everything their societies could not deliver. In this sense, all separate power has been spectacular. But this earlier universal devotion to a fixed religious imagery was only a shared acknowledgement of loss, an imaginary compensation for the poverty of a concrete social activity that was still generally experienced as a unitary condition. In contrast, the modern spectacle depicts what society could deliver, but in so doing, it rigidly separates what is possible from what is permitted. The spectacle keeps people in a state of unconsciousness as they pass through practical changes in their conditions of existence. Like a factitious god, it engenders itself and makes its own rules. It reveals itself for what it is, an autonomously developing separate power based on the increasing productivity resulting from an increasingly refined division of labor into parcelized gestures dictated by the independent movement of machines and working for an ever-expanding market. In the course of this development, all community and all critical awareness have disintegrated, and the forces that were able to grow by separating from each other have not yet been reunited. The general separation of worker and product tends to eliminate any direct personal communication between the producers and any comprehensive sense of what they are producing. With the increasing accumulation of separate products and the increasing concentration of the productive process, communication and comprehension are monopolized by the managers of the system. The triumph of this separation-based economic system proletarianizes the whole world. Due to the very success of this separate production of separation, the fundamental experience that in earlier societies was associated with people's primary work is in the process of being replaced, in sectors near the cutting edge of the system's evolution, by an identification of life with non-working time, with inactivity. But such inactivity is in no way liberated from productive activity. It remains dependent on it, in an uneasy and admiring submission to the requirements and consequences of the production system. It is itself one of the consequences of that system. There can be no freedom apart from activity, and within the spectacle activity is nullified, all real activity having been forcibly channeled into the global construction of the spectacle.
Robots will be able to do everything better than us.
Thus, what is referred to as a liberation from work, namely the modern increase in leisure time, is neither a liberation of work itself nor a liberation from the world shaped by this kind of work. None of the activity stolen by work can be regained by submitting to what that work has produced. The reigning economic system is a vicious circle of isolation. Its technologies are based on isolation, and they contribute to that same isolation. From automobiles to television, the goods that the spectacular system chooses to produce also serve it as weapons for constantly reinforcing the conditions that engender lonely crowds. With ever-increasing concreteness, the spectacle recreates its own presuppositions. The spectacle was born from the world's loss of unity, and the immense expansion of the modern spectacle reveals the enormity of this loss. The abstractifying of all individual labor and the general abstractness of what is produced are perfectly reflected in the spectacle, whose manner of being concrete is precisely abstraction. In the spectacle, a part of the world presents itself to the world and is superior to it. The spectacle is simply the common language of this separation. Spectators are linked solely by their one-way relationship to the very center that keeps them isolated from each other. The spectacle thus reunites the separated, but it reunites them only in their separateness. The alienation of the spectator which reinforces the contemplated objects that result from his own unconscious activity, works like this. The more he contemplates, the less he lives. The more he identifies with the dominant images of need, the less he understands his own life and his own desires. The spectacle's estrangement from the acting subject is expressed by the fact that the individual's gestures are no longer his own. They are the gestures of someone else who represents them to him. The spectator does not feel at home anywhere because the spectacle is everywhere. Workers do not produce themselves, they produce a power independent of themselves. The success of this production, the abundance it generates, is experienced by the producers as an abundance of dispossession. As their alienated products accumulate, all time and space become foreign to them. The spectacle is the map of this new world, a map that is identical to the territory it represents. The forces that have escaped us display themselves to us in all their power. The spectacle's social function is the concrete manufacture of alienation. Economic expansion consists primarily of the expansion of this particular sector of industrial production. The growth generated by an economy developing for its own sake can be nothing other than a growth of the very alienation that was at its origin. Though separated from what they produce, people nevertheless produce every detail of their world with ever-increasing power. They thus also find themselves increasingly separated from that world. The closer their life comes to being their own creation, the more they are excluded from that life. The spectacle is capital accumulated to the point that it becomes images. Self-consciousness exists in itself and for itself only, insofar as it exists in and for another self-consciousness. That is, it exists only by being recognized and acknowledged. Knowing this, that our old man was crucified with him, that the body of sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves of sin, Romans 6:6. However, there is not in everyone that knowledge. For some, with consciousness of the idol, until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience, being weak, is defiled, 1 Corinthians 8:7. Ideology is the intellectual basis of class societies within the conflictual course of history. Ideological expressions have never been pure fictions. They represent a distorted consciousness of realities, and as such they have been real factors that have in turn produced real distorting effects. This interconnection is intensified with the advent of the spectacle, the materialization of ideology brought about by the concrete success of an autonomized system of economic production, which virtually identifies social reality with an ideology that has remolded all reality in its own image. Once ideology, the abstract will to universality and the illusion associated with that will, is legitimized by the universal abstraction and the effective dictatorship of illusion that prevail in modern society, it is no longer a voluntaristic struggle of the fragmentary, but its triumph. Ideological pretensions take on a sort of flat, positivistic precision. They no longer represent historical choices. They are assertions of undeniable facts. The particular names of ideologies thus tend to disappear. The specifically ideological forms of systems supporting labor are reduced to an epistemological base that is itself presumed to be beyond ideology. Materialized ideology has no name, just as it has no formulatable historical agenda, which is another way of saying that the history of different ideologies is over. Ideology, whose whole internal logic led toward what Mannheim calls total ideology, the despotism of a fragment imposing itself as pseudo-knowledge of a frozen totality, as a totalitarian worldview, has reached its culmination in the immobilized spectacle of non-history. Its culmination is also its dissolution into society as a whole. When that society itself is concretely dissolved, ideology, the final irrationality standing in the way of historical life, must also disappear. The spectacle is the acme of ideology because it fully exposes and manifests the essence of all ideological systems, the impoverishment, enslavement, and negation of real life. The spectacle is the material expression of the separation and estrangement between man and man. The new power of deception concentrated in it is based on the production system in which, as the mass of objects increases, so do the alien powers to which man is subjected. This is the supreme stage of an expansion that has turned need against life. The need for money is thus the real need created by the modern economic system, and the only need it creates. Hegel's characterization of money as the self-moving life of what is dead has now been extended by the spectacle to all social life. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. 1 Timothy 6:10. The parallel between ideology and schizophrenia, demonstrated in Gabel's false consciousness, should be considered in the context of this economic materialization of ideology. Society has become what ideology already was. The repression of practice and the anti-dialectical false consciousness that results from that repression are imposed at every moment of everyday life, subjected to the spectacle, a subjection that systematically destroys the faculty of encounter and replaces it with a social hallucination, a false consciousness of encounter, an illusion of encounter. In a society where no one can any longer be recognized by others, each individual becomes incapable of recognizing his own reality. Ideology is at home. Separation has built its own world. In clinical descriptions of schizophrenia, says Gabel, the disintegration of the dialectic of totality, with dissociation as its extreme form, and the disintegration of the dialectic of becoming, with catatonia as its extreme form, seem closely interrelated. Imprisoned in a flattened universe bounded by the screen of the spectacle that has enthralled him, the spectator knows no one but the fictitious speakers who subject him to a one-way monologue about their commodities and the politics of their commodities. The spectacle as a whole serves as his looking glass. What he sees there are dramatizations of illusory escapes from a universal autism. The spectacle obliterates the boundaries between self and world by crushing the self besieged by the presence-absence of the world. It also obliterates the boundaries between true and false by repressing all directly lived truth beneath the real presence of the falsehood maintained by the organization of appearances. Individuals who passively accept their subjection to an alien everyday reality are thus driven toward a madness that reacts to this fate by resorting to illusory magical techniques. The essence of this pseudo-response to an unanswerable communication is the acceptance and consumption of commodities. The consumer's compulsion to imitate is a truly infantile need, conditioned by all the aspects of his fundamental dispossession. As Gabel puts it in describing a quite different level of pathology, the abnormal need for representation compensates for an agonizing feeling of being at the margin of existence. In contrast to the logic of false consciousness, which cannot truly know itself, the search for critical truth about the spectacle must also be a true critique. It must struggle in practice among the irreconcilable enemies of the spectacle and admit that it is nothing without them. By rushing into sordid reformist compromises or pseudo-revolutionary collective actions, those driven by an abstract desire for immediate effectiveness are in reality obeying the ruling laws of thought, adopting a perspective that can see nothing but the latest news. In this way, delirium reappears in the camp that claims to be opposing it. A critique seeking to go beyond the spectacle must know how to wait. The self-emancipation of our time is an emancipation from the material bases of inverted truth. This historic mission of establishing truth in the world can be carried out neither by the isolated individual nor by atomized and manipulated masses, but only and always by the class that is able to dissolve all classes by reducing all power to the de-alienating form of realized democracy, to councils in which practical theory verifies itself and surveys its own actions. This is possible only when individuals are directly linked to universal history, and dialogue arms itself to impose its own conditions. Upon analyzing Debord's work on the concept of the spectacle, I discovered that it offers remarkable revelations regarding the utilization of imagery, symbolism, economic allure, and authoritarian power by our adversary, Satan, to envelop history and the passage of time. An all-encompassing collective belief in awe-inspiring and captivating phenomena that has obscured the perception of numerous individuals and will persist until the day of judgment.